if you want people to really improve, then it can be helpful to know who the feedback is coming from, because your perspective as somebody who is in a different group, say, who works with me once a month, might be different than the person I work with every day.
Yeah.
And that can help you understand. And frankly, not all feedback is created equal.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Coffee Break Podcast, where our mission is to share business ideas, practices, and strategies while we enjoy our cup of coffee. Today's guest is Amy Gardner of Apochromatik. I think I got that correct. But thank you very much for joining us today. Before we get into the conversation, I do want to invite you to subscribe. If you have not done it already, you can do it on YouTube. You can follow us on Facebook, or you can just subscribe on whatever podcast platform you're listening to right now. And you can find all of the information by visiting Loc-Doc.net/podcast. We really would invite you to do that. We have a brand new episode that comes out every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. with great information about business ideas, practices, and strategies, and we hope you get some great benefit from it. We would also ask you to share this out if you haven't already. Make sure you share it with somebody that is going to get some benefit from it today. The conversation today with Amy Gardner is going to be really focused around things that you need to work on for team building. And we're going to really dive into the feedback component of team building and some of the functional fundamentals, the things that you really need to work on for your team in a growing business. Some of those things that may pull out in a dysfunctional team, or things that are working in a functional team that maybe need some improvement. It's going to be a good conversation. She's a very enjoyable guest all the way from Chicago. So grab a cup of coffee and let's get ready for this conversation.
We got so much to say. We got a podcast to make. We're sipping on lattes and it's time for a coffee break. Time for a coffee break. Oh, yeah.
Amy, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here all the way from Chicago.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
I've been trying to work on my Chicago accent for quite some time, but because my friend Ann Gruber, which we were just talking about, is from Chicago. And if she's listening to this, then I will not say all of the things that I said about her before we got started.
All good. All good. You know, I always think I don't have a Chicago accent. I grew up in Iowa.
Yeah.
But then when I see videos of myself, holy mackerel, it's like I'm like that guy in the guys from Da Bears segments on Saturday Night Live. And you're like, what has happened?
Well, I don't have a Southern accent either. And everybody
everybody
says I have a Southern accent. I said, no, I don't. And then they make fun of the way I say words. But anyways, we'll move on. Before we get into everything else, we've got to do rapid fire. 5 randomly selected questions just to get under your skin with unknown point values, and we'll give you a score at the end. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, here we go. Question number 1. If you could only have 3 apps on your phone, what would they be?
Oh. Spotify.
All right.
New York Times. Am I assuming that the alarm clock is already happening? We'll assume the alarm clock is built in, and then I would say some sort of running app, right? I use the Nike Run app. I use I'm always using different Couch to 5K apps, so some sort of run app, Spotify, and the New York Times app.
All right.
I love doing the puzzles.
Okay, there you go. So very interesting. I'm learning a lot about you. Okay, question number 2. What's the most spontaneous thing that you've ever done?
Oh, wow. One time I was going to a show out at Navy Pier at the Shakespeare Theater, and it was actually a show done by Second City. Mm-hmm. And a man came up during the show in the dark and whispered behind me, do you want to be on stage? And I said yes. And so I ended up doing this little walk-on thing. And it was hysterical because afterwards my husband is like, I can't believe you did that.
Very much out of character.
And yeah, he heard it and was like, what? So that would probably be one of the more spontaneous things. I did also, my husband and I did a 10-week round the world trip in 2018 on like 8 weeks planning. So that also was spontaneous, but at least there was some planning.
Yeah. I mean, 8 weeks of planning is a bit excessive in my book, but I mean, that's
for a 10-week round the world trip though. It was a little tight. So.
Where all did you go? It's interesting. 10 week around the world.
Yeah. So we got to go to We went to Peru. Well, we went first to Colombia, then we went to Peru because I really wanted to go to Machu Picchu, and then went to Lima as well. And we had to come back to Chicago for me to do a couple speaking engagements. And then with my mother-in-law, we went to South Korea and Japan.
Okay.
Sent her home from Japan. That was planned. And then we went on to Abu Dhabi and Dubai. Okay. And we went to Azerbaijan, Baku, Azerbaijan. By the way, it's like 10,000 degrees at this point, right? Because now we're in late July in Abu Dhabi. Then we went to Kiev. Then we had to fly back to DC because my best friend had her Senate confirmation hearing to become a federal judge. Naturally. Then went back to Spain. Yeah, went back to Spain, met some friends there, traveled around Spain, and then came home.
Wow. It was
awesome.
That's a very good list of locations to visit. I'm impressed.
Yep.
Okay. Question number 3. That didn't count as one of the questions, by the way.
Okay. Shoot. I thought I'd get out of one.
Question number 3. What book do you own but you've never read?
Oh, so many. Oh my gosh. A book I own I've never read. Oh, The Odyssey. But here's the thing. We were supposed to read it for freshman year in college over the summer, and I never finished it. And I was an English major. And I've never finished The Odyssey. Oops.
And you were supposed to.
So. Yeah. I mean, I think I got an A in that class too, but I just never finished it. I was not into The Odyssey.
Not much of a rule follower. Got it. All right. Question number 4. On an airplane, do you prefer the window or aisle seat?
Always aisle. Always aisle.
Why?
Yep. Because I can get out to go to the bathroom without bothering other people. And I just feel confined by the window, and I'd much rather be in the aisle.
Yeah. I alter back and forth between I sometimes prefer the window, but most of the time the aisle for that very reason, because I don't like to inconvenience other people if I need to get up.
Yeah, I don't want to have to climb over a stranger or wake them up or bother them. And if there's an emergency and you need to get out, I'd rather not have to get over 2 people to do it.
Yeah. Plus you hit your head when you stand up. It's just a whole big thing. Okay. Yep. Last question, number 5. What are you, a little bit of self-awareness, what are you hilariously bad at?
Oh, singing. So bad at singing. Like I was in church choir and everything, but yeah, it was never my thing. Yeah. My husband actually is a great voice and was always in like choir and show choir and all those things in high school and college. But yeah, me, no. Yeah,
I would say that I wouldn't necessarily put this that I'm hilariously bad at it, but I never know the lyrics. I just make up random words.
Yeah, me
but
too.
But I'm also not the guy that's really sitting around singing, so that's probably a big part of it. All right, well, congratulations, you passed. We're going to give you a score of 932 because I think that you did fantastic. All
right, great.
Lots of fun stories. All right, well, let's jump into it. So you have a business called Apochromatik.
Perfect.
I got it. Oh, man. I almost butchered it twice. All right. So Apochromatik, tell us a little bit about what it is that you do there, and then we're going to dive into a little bit of functional information because I'm intrigued by some of the stuff that we've already been discussing.
Sure. So there's really 2 parts to our business. The first part is we work with teams. And it initially started off that we were working with teams in law firms and teams of lawyers in corporations, but now has expanded well beyond that. We work with all different kinds of teams in different industries to help them get more engaged, become more effective at working together. And we do that working on, some of the topics you and I have already talked about, how to address conflict, building trust, uniting around a set of shared missions and values, emotional intelligence, all those things that we never learn how to do when we're being promoted as a manager. We never learn how to build trust, things like that. But the teams that don't have it, right? And any team, no matter how good they are at some of these areas, can always improve. And when they improve, it increases their retention and it increases their effectiveness. So that's one piece, is working with teams. And then the second piece of our work is helping lawyers advance or transition in their careers, either through one-on-one coaching or through our small group attorney mastermind. And I'm a former lawyer, and I'm in business with my husband, who has a management background. So that can kind of help you understand how all this came about. But now we both have certifications in team and leadership development, as well as in individual coaching.
So side conversation, because this may catch you off guard a little bit, and I don't apologize for it. What are some lessons that you've learned working with your spouse?
I think it's so important when you're working with your spouse to have your lanes.
Okay.
Right? So, for example, I do not have particularly great taste. So when it came time to design a logo, that was 150% Keith. He worked with a designer. He brought me some ideas, but he literally drew out our logo on a napkin, sent a picture to the designer. He handled all of that. There are parts of our business, back end parts of our business that he entirely handles. Some of our corporate clients, we will do workshops together, but we each have different clients that we're the primary contact for. And I think you have to have that respect that you trust your partner, and you trust their capabilities, and that you can then call on the other when something is out of your lane. So every day we will bounce situations off each other, working with whether it's individual coaching clients or teams, and rely on each other and hear the other person's viewpoint. But you have to know who's the final decision maker on whose lane that the issue falls in under.
Very good advice. So having some kind of clear defined parameters as you get started.
We understand the frustrations HOA board members and property managers face when deciding the best solution for their HOA and pool security. Should we use a keypad, hand out keys, or install a key card system? Do we even need cameras? These are some of the questions that are difficult to navigate, and we're here to help. At Loc-Doc Security, we've spent over 20 years working with homeowners associations and property managers to find the system that best fits the pool and HOA needs. Camera systems for the front gate or front entrance, key card systems for the pool gates, or simply updating the gate so that it meets safety and code compliance. We like to take the guesswork out of the process to answer any questions and help find the right solution. Our mission is to help you protect your people and your property, and that includes pools. Contact our team today to schedule your free consultation for your community.
Let's jump into this concept of teams because trying to tackle some of those items that you were discussing. I have found a lot of interest, and if those that are watching the podcast, you can kind of see in the right side of the screen, there's a few books down there, Radical Candor, and there's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. Those are books that we use. I've got 1 or 2 of those on the desk here as well. Those are books that we utilize in our organization regularly. As a matter of fact, the record date that we're doing this today, yesterday, I actually had a breakout session and a team meeting with a group talking about the team assessments for the 5 dysfunctions of a team, because that's something that we want to constantly be working on in our organization, trying to thrive there. I will say this, and this is the interesting thing when we started doing some kind of research on what you do, is I also understand that that's not a natural thing. I think it's a natural desire that every organization wants and every leader wants in their organization to have a functional environment, functional team. The path to get there is often unclear. So when you walk into a situation with an organization, you say, hey, we need some kind of help just clarifying some of our mission and our goals, and we want to do something, but we have an overwhelming desire to get there, but we need some help in kind of getting ourselves all on the same track. How do you kind of walk into that situation and start to assess what's going on?
Yeah, so that's really common. People almost never call us and say, we have problems resolving conflict. What that happens is they say, we have a great team, but it just feels like some things are off, or we're having some retention issues, things like that. Yep. And we always come in assuming that there are great people on the team, and it's just a matter of helping them get re-engaged with each other and get on the same page. And so we will start off talking with the folks who've reached out to us, but we often also talk to other people in the organization to just get a sense of what is their perspective, because the person who leads a team may not have the same perspective as a more junior person. And just, as practically speaking, you want everyone to feel invested in this process. So it might be that we do a survey to the whole team. It might be that we just do, a couple interviews with some members of the team and really get a better picture of what the team might need. Now, sometimes that isn't possible, right? Sometimes it's a matter of we have this retreat coming up and we need something ready for that. But when we're really able to focus on how we're going to transform the team, that's the approach we like to use. And then once we have the information, we really work with the client to co-create what we're going to do. And it might be that we decide together, all right, we're going to have 6 2-hour sessions over the course of a quarter, maybe, or whatever it is. And we're going to do these types of assessments and we're going to do this one-on-one with people, whatever it is. But we will often go into an engagement having the broad contours laid out, but some of it is seeing what happens, right? So the team, where people always say everything is fine. And then maybe in the second session, we often call it the putting the skunk on the table, where we will say, all right, so what are you not telling us?
Yeah.
What are the skunks that need to be addressed? And we approach it different ways with different teams. But part of, frankly, being a small company is that we are really good at pivoting in the moment. And I can't tell you how often, we are told by a leader, we really need a workshop on X, and we are in the middle of a workshop on X, and one of those skunk comes out. Yeah. And this is part of working with your spouse, right? You know each other so well that you can look at each other in Zoom and say, all right, so let's call an audible. Yeah. We're going to focus on this. So
focus on the major issue here. The reference I like to use a lot of times, Steve Jobs, in the biography about Steve Jobs, they talk about the reality distortion field that he lived in a lot of times, where he assumed things were a certain way, or he pretended things were a certain way. And I think it's natural from a leadership perspective that it's easy to fall into that category of reality distortion of, hey, this is the way things are. And so it's very important to have an outside perspective to come in and start to ask those questions. You can do it with your own team. You can sit down and just ask the question and listen if you are in tune enough to be able to do that. But having an outside perspective to come in and say, hey, kind of what's going on? What are you really seeing, regardless of what this individual in a leadership position assumes to be the case.
And, exactly. And we'll often say you can't see the spinach in your own teeth, right? It is not a character flaw to not realize that some folks need help with, being more direct, say. It's not that at all. The reality is that we often put our leaders up on a pedestal. We don't want to bring them problems unless we have solutions. And they may not know. I mean, we worked with a fantastic team where the leader was not aware and the leader was new, had never met anybody in person yet, did not know that 2 of the team members didn't speak to each other. Oh, and this wasn't his fault, right? Like this isn't something you tell the new guy, right? And it was a long-standing issue, and that kind of thing. You would hope that somebody would tell the leader, but of course you don't. When who's going to go? Tell, right? Well,
I was having a conversation with somebody recently that was a leader, and they were talking about the fact that one of their concerns, and as they continue to navigate kind of different levels of organization, is that their awareness that they only get a filtered perspective of things happening. So it's a real high priority for them to kind of dive in and figure out what's happening, kind of at that the front end of the organization, because anything that comes to them is going to have a high level of filtration.
Right.
So that is, again, another reason to bring somebody else in to ask those questions.
And you're exactly right. And I would also just add that when you have somebody come in from the outside, it sends a message that even if things are going well, we want them to be great. Yeah. Right. I always think of the American Airlines videos they used to show on the plane that say, great is what we're going for. I mean, even if you feel like everything's fine, I mean, you want your workers to feel like things are great, right? And to be excited about going to work and just showing them, hey, we value your happiness. We value your success. We want the team to be as great as it can be. And so that's why we're investing this time and energy. Yeah. That alone sends a message besides all the benefits of, addressing underlying issues and improving them.
I think it's difficult at any organization, because you walk into a level of demand. We have to get things accomplished. Things have got to get moving. We've got to get the work done. And oftentimes we defer some of these fundamental components because we just have to get the work done. And there's been so many examples here recently where we've been talking about it, and you're just building debt at whatever point, right? Maybe it's not financial debt. You're building debt of some level because you're just deferring that off to another time frame. Having some type of a framework to be able to walk through this, or understanding those fundamentals that are relevant to the people, because in any organization, it's people, right, that are working together. I was having a conversation with some guys last night, and we're talking about trying to scale, trying to grow, and what are ways that you can implement things in your organization to generate revenue while you're sleeping rather than the physical work at hand. And the fact is, it comes down to is there is an innate need and a desire for people to be able to work together to accomplish something. So that's a major component. People, if you read the book Traction, the people component, it's a really big factor. So then you have to understand what are these things that drive people and that cause issues and conflict and all that. So I want to kind of continue down this path and pivot a little bit. One of the things that I've identified in kind of my role over the years is in what I establish as my key results areas is conflict resolution. And so that's something that I'm very keenly aware of because I don't like conflict to rise up in the organization. So I want to get that resolved. And as part of that, I think, is creating good structure for having core values and fundamentals and all of these types of things. So when you walk into an organization, I'm summing this up to a question, I swear. So when you walk into an organization and you start to kind of dissect this, what are you seeing things that they're missing? Common denominators across those organizations, things that are missing that they have to kind of start working on first so that you can start to see some benefit in the team and some improvement in the team?
I often think it comes back to relationships, right? So you're a busy business owner or whatever type of business you're in, you're busy. And that's why you add a person to the team, right? And so often people aren't onboarded particularly well, but maybe you taught them how to use the computer system and how to bill copies to the right account number. You do those sorts of things, but besides a first day lunch, did you really get to know each other? And that's something that we see a lot. I mean, I ran a team of 9 people when I was in higher education. And I remember one time I rotated who had to lead the staff meetings. And one time a person asked about a failure and we went around the table and it turned out that something like half of us had failed our behind the wheel driver's test. And we had grown up on 3 continents. We ranged from like 25 to probably 55 years old, all these things, all these big differences on paper. But hearing that, several of us were not so great at driving when we were 16 or 18 years old, that kind of thing, it's just a little thing, right? But if you don't get to know people, then when you think that someone stole your client, you're going to march down there, loaded for bear versus, hey, what happened here? Right. So if you don't handle the relationships, then the little things can become the big things. And we're seeing this all across the economy, right? People can get another job. And so they are leaving, and you don't want to lose people just because you didn't lay that foundation of building a relationship. And it's going to cost you so much more time and money to bring in a new person than to spend time investing in building those relationships, building that trust and communication.
So what are some of the factors that you help with identifying how to start building those relationships? Because so that it sounds easy, I guess, at the start of it, but to actually put that in action, how are you bringing that to life?
Well, so one thing is that process of work. If it's a team where they need to work on, their mission, where the team is going, the goals, that really helps build relationships because they start to look toward the future together. So that can be huge. Some of these things are very simple. We worked with one team that decided that they were each going to have a one-on-one virtual coffee with all the other people on that team. And they set a time deadline to do it. And you think what's really fixed by a half-hour virtual coffee? But, if you've never had a half-hour virtual coffee and you've worked with someone or real coffee and you've worked with somebody for 5 years, that is a good place to start, right? It's something that's manageable. Everyone can find 30 minutes. So it depends on the situation. And they were doing lots of other work beyond that. But you've got to get people to build those relationships as human beings one-on-one. And then in terms of the team, looking forward together. And, some of the things that we do, so for example, we use a proprietary model where we look at different parts of the wheel and decide what teams need. But there's really, even if you're talking about how we're giving feedback to each other, that can help build the relationship, right? Because it helps clear the air. And then it has a common language, common approaches, and you talk through these things together. So a lot of it, frankly, is you've got to spend the time. And we've seen during the pandemic, so many people got rid of one-on-ones. They reduced staff meeting length. And it was out of a place of compassion, particularly for working parents. Employers were trying to make it easier. But then what we see is, you can't just say, you know what, my managers are so busy, we're not going to have reviews this quarter. Yeah. Right. Like you can only do that for so long. And then you really see the damage.
We recently, some of our team came up with a fitness challenge where they had it was over a course of a month, and they had a couple of factors that were unique about it, and that's what I wanted to share. Is they were able to rotate out every week. They everybody that had volunteered for the challenge, they were rotating out to a different team every week. So it created, and they were encouraged to communicate, to keep up with each other and all that. So it was one of the side benefits of it that was not intentional was you had a lot of these unnatural collisions of people that you weren't naturally working with, and you got to start communicating and chatting with them. So it's an interesting thing that you say, kind of committing to one-on-one virtual coffee with other people on the team because you're just trying to create some connection points.
Can you copy this key? That's a question we get asked about 3,422 times a year. And how can you actually be sure that the person who asked that question is supposed to get a copy of that key? Well, we think you should always know who can copy your keys to your business and your home, because it could be your neighbor, an old employee, a contractor, or even worse, your mother-in-law. At Loc-Doc Security, we believe in protected key systems, so you always know who has a copy of your key. To find out more, visit locdoc.net or stop by our Charlotte location. Loc-Doc Security, helping you protect your people and your property.
When you talk about feedback, because I think this is something that we as a whole just kind of struggle with, trying to create some feedback loops and all that. And a lot of times people become very reserved in what they say to somebody else because they either, one, don't want to hurt their feelings, or two, they just come across like a jerk, and then the other person gets defensive, and then now you just have this kind of constant cycle. When you say feedback, what are you talking about? How to create a good feedback loop or create, I guess, positive feedback environment?
And this is something that we see across industries, across teams. We hear all the time. I mean, we hear this from managing partners at giant law firms that they do not want to give negative feedback because they're afraid the person's going to cry or they're going to yell, right? And that is, so it doesn't matter what your business is, where you are, nobody wants to see somebody cry or be yelled at. So one of the things that we really focus on when we're talking about feedback, and sometimes we're brought in just to do a training on feedback, and then other times it's part of a larger discussion. But it really fits into this discussion of radical candor. And it is not ultimately kind to someone to not tell them their fly is down, right? Like, I think we all know as human beings, we would rather be told. And when you view it as being told you need to improve your writing, it's the same situation, right? And part of it too, though, is the mindset of the person receiving feedback. And that's something that we work on as well, that we have this thing like, and I had this for a long time, so I'm not trying to minimize or anything like that. We view it as, little kids think that if they cover their eyes, then the other person can't see them. That's how we view it with feedback, right? So if I don't know that you think I need to work on ABC, then I assume that it doesn't exist. The reality is when you tell me, now I can do something about it. Yeah. And I couldn't before. So we talk all the time, like, you don't want to actually be a mushroom. You do not want to be in the dark. You want that information. And part of it then too, for the person receiving feedback, is when you hear you're doing a good job, to then dig into it, to say, great, what should I be sure to repeat next time? Yeah. and then say, and what could I change next time?
Mm-hmm.
And so the person receiving feedback is not powerless to change the environment. They can go into their boss. If say you're in a place where people aren't giving you a lot of feedback, you can walk into your boss and say, hey, I'm working on goals for next quarter, and I want to improve on 3 areas at work. I've decided that one of them is going to be talking less in meetings. Do you have a suggestion for 2 or 3? And so you've opened the door. You've said, hey, I'm committed to improving. Here's one area. So I'm not afraid of, having a reasonable approach. And then when they tell you something, you can say, will you help hold me accountable to improve in that? And now you've gotten them on your side. Yeah. And it can really help you be viewed as serious about your career, as committed to changing. And again, it's something that you can do as a person who wants more feedback, who knows that you need it to grow. And then one more thing on this, I would just say that we hear all the time from people who come to us saying they want to leave their jobs, that one of the reasons is because they're not getting constructive feedback, so they know they're not going to advance. So it really is a retention issue. If you've got great employees, they know they need to improve. And if you're not helping them do it, they'll go to somebody who will.
I'll tell you this, and maybe you can coach a little bit on this and unpack some of it. Historically, many years ago, and we probably fall in this category some now, but we were really bad about giving feedback once a year during a review. And it was just, all of the things that needed to be improved upon. And I don't remember exactly which book it was. It may have been Radical Candor. It may have been Powerful. I'm not sure. But there was a major conversation and kind of a click that said, those are conversations that need to be had on a more regular basis so that it's not a surprise. Someone shouldn't walk into a review and go, what? Well, if I would have known that 8 months ago, then I would have been happy to work on it. But you've robbed me of the opportunity to improve. So having more frequent, regular reviews or regular feedback loops is a major component of it. Is that something that you're seeing as well, or is that just something I made up?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think that annual reviews are swell, but they can't just be all that there is. You've got to be giving people feedback on a regular basis. I actually, when I was practicing law, when I needed to give somebody constructive feedback, I would take them across the street to the cookie place that had discounted cookies after 3:00. Yeah. I'd get them a cookie. I'd get myself a cookie, and we'd have a conversation. Yep. And I did that as an ongoing way so that people were getting the feedback and in an environment that was more comfortable. Sure. And I really like cookies. So it encouraged everybody to get more feedback, right? Whatever works for you, you've got to do that. And if it doesn't come naturally to you, put it in your calendar every month and ask the folks that you need to give feedback to help you do that, right? Because then they can hold you accountable. They can come to you and say, hey, you know what? It's the 25th and we haven't talked about how I'm doing. So get them on it too.
In a feedback perspective, do you see value in peer feedback as well?
I think that peer feedback can be helpful in the right circumstances. Okay. So we will sometimes do 360 reviews. I think that you've got to have some clear ground rules. Okay. And you've got to have some filtering. Okay. Because if, Henry down the hall is feeling competitive with Sue, then Henry's feedback may not be what Sue needs to hear at this point in her career, right? And so I think you don't want to have people doing their own initial review. You want to have somebody else involved, and you've got to make sure that you have a culture where you've made it safe to give honest feedback. So if you've worked on having difficult conversations, you've worked on that, you can get to the point where people can have those conversations respectfully. I think it depends on the people and the environment, whether you can jump right into that. Yeah.
I'll ask some follow-up questions on feedback, because this is to me, this is unpacking a very interesting concept. And I know it's just one of the many things that you probably touch on in your framework, but I do think it's very powerful for businesses as a whole. Anonymous peer feedback versus whatever the opposite of that would be.
Signed or whatever.
So how do you have an opinion on that? And maybe it has some to do with what you were just talking about, clear rules and kind of having a culture that's okay to start there first. Like you just don't want to walk in and say, okay, who wants to give anybody feedback? Let's just start there.
Right. I think that it depends on the environment, but if you want people to really improve, then it can be helpful to know who the feedback is coming from, because your perspective as somebody who is in a different group, say, who works with me once a month, might be different than the person I work with every day.
Yeah.
And that can help you understand. And frankly, not all feedback is created equal. I'll never forget when I was a senior associate at a law firm, I had a review that was glowing except for one guy.
Yeah.
And the partner doing my review said, who said, literally, she reads me what the feedback says. And she goes, who said this? And then she looks and she's like, forget that.
Yeah.
And she told me who it was. So I do think that there can be you have to understand their different perspectives. You also don't want a situation where people are just sucking up to their friends.
Yeah.
And so I think it really depends on the setting, and you want to work through where are we as a team, what's going to be most productive, what's going to be most helpful, what's our goal behind this. You know, you don't want to just have 360s or whatever it is because, other businesses are doing it.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that it's because it's going to advance the goals that you have for your team to improve.
I appreciate you saying that, because I think that is it helps to clarify a lot. If you have a common mission, you have a common goal that you're working behind, and you have created a framework for feedback that is safe and will align with that, because outside of that, you're just opening up a conversation to say, hey, tell anybody anything that you don't like about them. And so now it's just broad. But if we could say, hey, we want you to give feedback to your peers on how they're performing in regards to the mission that we're trying to accomplish, then now you have a lot better clarity towards that, which I am trying to process that now in my head, how we can do that in our organization to get that more in line, because feedback, I think, is always good. But yeah, just opening up to say whatever you want. Like, I don't like your haircut, and you looked at me weird the other day is probably not going to be constructive. It's just going to open up probably more conflict.
Yeah. And if you do it as, we just finished this project, let's do an after action review. Something like that, where it's really focused on the work rather than individual people. You can have a discussion where you say, I really appreciated that Nikki came through on a Friday afternoon when the client changed their requirements. You can have that, work those things into that larger discussion, but have it be focused on the work rather than on individual people. So they still get the feedback without it feeling like, an ambush.
Very cool. All right. I like it. I want to honor your time because I know we're pushing up against the end of our time that we've got scheduled here. I really appreciate this kind of the information that you've given to this point. If someone wants to find out more, because again, this is just a cusp, I think, of what you bring to the table. What is the best way for them to connect with you and kind of be able to utilize you as a resource?
Sure. So please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Amy M. Gardner on LinkedIn. You can also email me, amy@apochromatik.com. And I do want to share, we do offer complimentary team strategy calls where we will hop on Zoom with you and talk about what's going on with your team and offer suggestions for things that you might be able to do going forward. And we're happy to extend that to listeners of the podcast. So if you email amy@apochromatik.com, you'll be able to talk with either me or my fellow principal at the firm. We don't farm those out to anybody else.
Sure.
And we'll be glad to talk with you about the situation that you're seeing and how we might be able to suggest some resources to help, whether that's, one of the great books that we recommend or if it's something more extensive.
Very cool. Well, I think it's a very noble function when we talk about as an organization having those functional fundamentals that you really need to be mindful of as you're trying to grow your business. Don't disregard those for the betterment of just trying to get revenue or income, but making sure that you have a very focused intentionality behind growing and building a solid team. So, Amy, thanks again for joining us today. It was such a blast. Great to chat with you. Just a fun time all together. Those of you who are listening for the first time, make sure you subscribe. We've got more episodes coming up that are going to be really much in tune with what we just talked about today. Lots of good information about your organization, about team building, about growth, about making decisions, all of those things. They're all available on all of our podcasts. There's over 150 episodes for you to check out. So you can go ahead and binge listen or binge watch. Make sure you check it out on YouTube, Loc-Doc Inc., LOCDOCINC, and all the information is available at locdoc.net/podcast. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time right here on the Coffee Break Podcast.